Have you ever been caught doing something? When I say that, my assumption is that you think of something bad, something that you shouldn't have done, getting caught doing something wrong, getting caught red-handed, if you will. I don't feel like I was a bad kid growing up. I feel like I was a decent kid. But there were a couple things that I always got caught doing. One was around Christmas time or my birthday, I always got caught snooping. Okay, I always wanted to sneak a peek. I would try to find out where my mom was hiding the presents. I'd try to just see what they were. If they were already wrapped around Christmas time and under the tree, I would, go try to find which one was mine, shake it, try to figure out which one it was. And my mom caught me every single time. Another thing that I would always get caught doing growing up is eating leftovers. Okay, I love leftovers. Anyone else? No one else? Okay, I'll take the leftovers. I love leftovers almost more than the actual meal. So sometimes if we're getting pizza or wings or something, I'll order extra just so I can have leftovers in the fridge. But something I would get caught doing often is eating everyone else's leftovers. So if there was food in the fridge, I was going to eat it, and usually it was my dad that was not happy the next day because I ate it. There's also just something about growing up that I feel like my mom just knew every single thing that was going on. Even the things that I didn't think I told anyone, she just knew it. Whether I liked a girl in high school or whether something went wrong in the classroom or whatever it was, my mom, she just always knew what was going on. She always caught what I was trying to do. But have you ever got caught doing something good on the flip side? Doing something good, doing something positive. Maybe you're trying to surprise your mom or your dad, and so you're helping around the house, but then they see you doing it. Or you help a classmate or a friend in the hallway or help them with homework, and you don't want people to recognize or see, but people catch you and they see what you're doing. Have you ever been caught doing something? And the reason that I bring this up and start with it tonight is because in our story for tonight, in our text for tonight, we're going to catch Jesus doing something. We're going to catch Jesus in the act of doing something that's pretty significant, pretty important, but on the front, when we just read the text, it doesn't seem like it is. It seems like this is something that's just kind of thrown in at the end of a story, but it's something that Luke puts in there for a reason, and it's something that we actually catch Jesus doing that can have real implications for our life. Our story for tonight is Luke 5, verses 12 through 16. And like I said, the main thing that we're going to focus on tonight, Luke only writes one sentence about it. That's the only part of the story. He only writes one little sentence about it. It's something that most of us, if we're reading in our devotional time or we're going through the book of Luke, we would probably gloss over, we'd probably skip over, not think much of. But we catch Jesus in this act, and I want to focus on that and talk about it tonight. So Luke 5, verses 12 through 16, here's what it says. In one of the villages, Jesus met a man with an advanced case of leprosy. When the man saw Jesus, he bowed with his face to the ground, begging to be healed. "Lord," he said, "if you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean." Jesus reached out and touched him. "I'm willing," he said, "be healed." And instantly the leprosy disappeared. Then Jesus instructed him not to tell anyone what had happened. He said, "Go to the priest and let him examine you. Take along the offering required in the law of Moses for those who have been healed of leprosy. This will be a public testimony that you have been cleansed." But despite Jesus' instructions, the report of his power spread even faster, and vast crowds came to hear him preach and to be healed of their diseases. But Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. That is our text for tonight, and there's a lot going on in this story. There's a lot of different things that we could focus on and talk about, but what we're going to focus on for the rest of tonight is one single verse, verse 16. Here's it is. But Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. And here's why I want us to focus on this verse. Like I said, it's because Luke, the author of this, he catches Jesus in this act of withdrawing, of going to the wilderness for prayer. Luke catches Jesus in the midst of right after a big miracle, people hearing about it, people coming from all over to see Jesus. We catch Jesus getting away, leaving everything, leaving the commotion and the noise, leaving the people, leaving maybe his responsibility in that moment. He leaves it all and he goes to be alone with God. And so as we continue in this series talking about how we can bridge the gap between who we are and who we want to be, or bridge the gap between where our relationship with God is and where we want it to go, the idea that I want us to talk about tonight is solitude. Now, solitude might not be a normal thing that you know what it is. You might not know what it is at all. It might not be a normal thing that you talk about or that you even practice. But solitude, I believe it's very practical for us, and I believe that it can help us bridge the gap between us and God. And so let's just dive into what solitude is and what it looks like for us. The first thing is that solitude is time alone with God. Before we get into all of the details, before we go any further, let's just identify that solitude is time alone with God. By definition, very simply, solitude just means the state of being alone. But for our context, what we're talking about as a spiritual discipline, solitude is not just being alone, but it's being alone, just you and God. Solitude is time alone with God. That's what Jesus is doing in this story. He just finishes doing this miraculous healing and miracle. And then as the word gets out and people are coming from all over, he stops and he withdraws. He goes to the wilderness for prayer. He goes to be alone with God. And this word wilderness in our story for tonight, what that word means is just empty or lonely or a solitary place. What that means is he goes somewhere where no one else is, where nothing else is, where he can just be alone and focus on only God. I love the way that the Message version puts it. It says, Jesus withdrew to out-of-the-way places for prayer. Well, out of the way of what? Out of the way of everything. The noise, the busyness, the people, the distractions, the responsibility, the worries. He withdrew from everything that was going on, everything that could be going on, everything that he could be doing, everyone that he could be talking to, everyone that he could be healing, to be alone with God. And so let me ask you a question. How often do you do this? How often in your life do you go away from everything? The TV, the phone, the people, the responsibilities, your schoolwork, the noise. How often do you just get away from everything and spend time just you and God? Is that a normal thing for you to do? Is that something that you're doing regularly? I think it's a very simple thing. Right? I think now we can all understand what solitude is on some level, but it's also very challenging to actually put into practice. I'll be honest, last Monday night, I did this in the absolute worst way possible. Okay, so this was Monday night. I'm preparing this message on Tuesday, and I'm just like, wow, I screwed up. So Monday night is the college football championship, okay? Michigan versus Washington. Well, I had some friends over to watch the game with me, and we were hanging out. They left at halftime, okay? And at halftime, I decided to go up to my room, and I was just going to spend some alone time with God. It had been a long, busy day. I was like, I just need to be with God and just focus on him for a little bit. And so I go up to my room. I'm at my desk. I got my Bible and my journal, and I'm just sitting there ready to spend time with God. But in the back of my head, I know that the championship is still on. So I get my remote and I turn the game on, but it's behind me, right? My desk faces this way, my TV's over here, so it's not like I'm watching it, but I wanted to know what happened with the game, and so I'm focusing on God, right? I'm reading, I'm talking with him, I'm thinking about him, but like every minute I'm turning around and seeing what's happening in the game, trying to stay up with that. And then at the same time, my fiance Ashley and my mom are both texting me in a group chat trying to figure out these wedding things and all these plans. And so every time my phone goes off, I see it light up. And so I pick up my phone and I text them back. But I'm focusing on God. But I got the college championship game on. And you could say at the end of the hour, at the end of the night, yeah, maybe I spent time with God. But if I'm being honest with you, I really just ignored him for the last hour. I wanted to spend time with him. I had every intention to, but all the busyness of what was going on with Ashley and my mom and the distraction of the game took me away from him, and I really just ignored him. Can you relate to that story? Have you ever been in a similar situation? Maybe for you want to spend time with God, you want to read your Bible, you're reading it on the Bible app, and then a message pops up, and then one thing leads to another, and you don't even remember the reason that you got on your phone in the first place. Right? Or maybe you want to spend time with God, or you are spending time with God, but then your mind is just racing. All the things you got to get done, all the homework assignments you have, all the people that you need to talk to, and you just can't get your mind to settle down to focus on God. Or maybe you're spending time with them, but you just get so bored, so tired, you feel like it's not worth your time. Maybe you fall asleep, or maybe you just stop because you feel like it's just unproductive. The thing is that I think one of the biggest struggles that most of us can have when it comes to solitude, when it comes to spending time with God, is that we're just too busy. I think that most of us are just too busy. Follow me here for a second. I don't know all of you. Okay, I feel like I'm starting to know a good chunk of you. I know a lot of you, but I don't know every single person in here. And so I'm going on a little bit of a limb when I say this, a little bit of an assumption, but my guess, not everyone, but almost everyone in here would say that they love God. Okay, if I were to ask you, do you love God? My assumption is that most of you would say, yeah, I love God. Another assumption that I'm going to make, and again, I don't know all of you, but my assumption is that if I were to ask you if you struggled to have intentional time focused on God, most of you would probably say, yeah, that's a struggle. It's hard. You might want to, but it might not be a normal thing for you to do. You struggle to just have intentional time every day with God. So how do we reconcile those two things? What's the relationship between those two things? If we say we love God, but then we also say that it's a struggle and it can be hard to just spend time with Him. Well, I think the relationship between those two things comes down to this. I think that it's because we are, one, we're busy, and two, we're distracted. I think that we are very busy and distracted people. It's not that we don't love God, it's just that sometimes we forget about Him. Or it's not that we don't love God, it's just that sometimes we have a lot of other things that we need to be doing. It's not that we don't love God, it's just that sometimes we don't have time for Him. For some of us in this room, I believe that our life and our relationship with God would change if we made it a daily, weekly practice to just spend uninterrupted time with God. If we want to grow in our relationship with God, then we have to spend time with Him. We have to spend time alone with Him. We need to withdraw from everything else, get away from the TV, get away from the distractions, get away from the noise, the busyness, the people, the worries, get away from everything and just spend time just you and Him. In a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, John Mark Comer says this. And really listen to this because I think this quote is pretty profound. It says, Corrie ten Boom once said that if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. There's truth in that. Both sin and busyness have the same exact effect. They cut off your connection to God, to other people, and even to your own soul. And I think for so many of us, including myself, we can go through seasons of life where we feel disconnected to God, or we feel like there's a big gap between us and God. And I think a lot of it can come back to the fact that we're just too busy and we're too distracted. But in our story for tonight, Jesus, he had just done several teachings. If you go back and read the couple chapters or paragraphs previous to our story for tonight, he had just done several teachings, miracles, healings, all of these amazing things. And it gets to the point where word is spreading. People are coming. People want to be healed. People want to know who this guy is. And in the midst of all of this, he recognizes the importance and the significance of getting away from it all, getting away from everything that was going on in that moment just to be alone with God. And if Jesus recognizes the importance of doing this, then how much more do we need to recognize the importance of doing this? Here's the second thing that I want us to understand about solitude. It's that solitude should be done regularly. This should be a regular thing that we do. I'm going to put up two different translations of this verse 16. The NLT says, but Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. I love the Message version. It says, as often as possible. Jesus withdrew to out-of-the-way places for prayer. Here's what I want us to realize, is that Jesus spending time with the Father was a normal, regular thing that he did. It wasn't a one-off thing. It wasn't a random thing. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. This was a normal, regular practice that Jesus had as part of his life. No matter what was going on, whether things were great, whether he was on a mountaintop, whether things were really bad, whether he was literally in moments before he would go to the cross and die, Jesus made sure to set aside time to be with the Father. And it isn't just this story that we see this. Really, this is a major theme that you would see in the book of Luke. If you went and studied it and read it all, this is a common thing that Luke, the author, kind of notes and puts in there for us to see. Is that Jesus was regularly, as often as possible, finding ways to withdraw and go and be alone with God. If we want to bridge the gap between who we are and who we want to be, between us and God, then this has to be a normal thing for us to do, because the more that we pursue God, the more that we chase after him, the more time that we spend with him. Just think about your relationships with your friends or your parents or your boyfriend or girlfriend. The more time you spend with them, the deeper your relationship is going to grow, the closer you're going to be with them, and the same is true with God. This was a normal and regular thing for Jesus because it was a priority for him, and it was a priority for him because he recognized how desperately he needed God. Jesus recognized how desperately he needed God, and I believe that's because he walked through his life clothed in humility. If you want to read this week, read Philippians 2, 1 through 11. It details the humility that Jesus walked through, but Jesus, he understood how much he needed the Father because he walked through life with this humility. And so something that I think we all need to ask ourselves is, do we realize how much we need God? Or do we think that we can make it through this life on our own? Because if we recognize how much we need God, if we recognize how much we actually need him in our lives, then we will make it a priority to spend time with him. When I was growing up, Fridays were one of my favorite days of the week. Okay, I still love Fridays to this day, but when I was in high school, there was just like a different feeling on Fridays. Do you guys feel that way? Like, I can feel it like in my body. It's like, okay, it's Friday today. I'm just excited. I'm ready to go. I can get through the day, but I loved Fridays. Well, Fridays were also my dad's day off from work. Okay, so he had Fridays off, and one thing that I could count on almost every single Friday was that I'd get home from school, I'd walk through that door, I'd walk into my living room, and I would see the same thing. I would see my dad laying on the couch, feet propped up, probably a blanket on him, golf on the TV, and just snoring away. Okay? This was like every single Friday. I mean, it was just taking a little Friday afternoon nap, right? Like, who can blame the guy? I would love to do that. But here's the thing about my dad. This didn't just happen by accident. Okay? It wasn't like my dad on a Friday was, and not trying to bash my dad, but it wasn't like my dad on a Friday was doing the dishes or vacuuming the living room, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he finds himself on the couch with a pillow, feet propped up, blanket, golf on the TV, and then he's asleep. Right? It wasn't this random thing. My dad knew that he wanted to relax a little bit, and so he puts golf on. He gets real comfy on the couch. He gets his favorite pillow, knowing that he's probably going to fall asleep. Here's why I say this. We're not accidentally going to find ourselves spending time with God. It's not something that we're just going to be walking through our life and then all of a sudden we're going to find ourselves away from everyone else, just time with us and him. If we want to spend time with God, if we want to be with just him and you, then that has to be something that you're intentional about. It has to be something that you're disciplined in. It has to be something that you plan. We need to schedule time with God. If you're going to hang out with your friends or your boyfriend or girlfriend, you got to plan it, right? When I was in high school, still to this day, basically on like a Monday or Tuesday, I'm planning my weekend. A lot of times it was on a Monday because Mondays are just terrible, and so it's like, all right, what do I have to look forward to? What am I going to do on this Friday night? If we're going to do something, if we want to hang out with someone, we got to plan a little bit, right? You got to schedule that time. Well, what would it look like for you to plan and schedule time with God? And to make it very practical, pick a time and a place. Schedule time alone with God by picking a time and a place. For me, it's typically every morning and every night. I try to bookend my days every morning, every night, spending time alone with God. Most of the time, it's at that desk that I was talking about in my room. It's not always, but a lot of times it is. But I have a time and I have a place. What would it look like for you to pick that time and place? 1 Timothy 4:7 talks about training yourself for godliness. Godliness, becoming more like Jesus, growing in our relationship with God. Those aren't things that just happen incidentally or by accident. Those are things that we have to intentionally pursue, and it takes discipline. Here's the last thing, is that solitude is like a date with God. Okay? Solitude is like a date with God. There's two main reasons why I say this. The first is that, I kind of hinted at it earlier, but if you like someone, the best way to grow in that relationship is by spending time with someone. Okay, little dating advice. If you like someone, the best way to not grow in that relationship is by just Snapchatting or texting or FaceTiming all the time. Amen, right? The best way to actually grow in that relationship or pursue that person is by spending time with them, right? Going on dates with them. The same is true with God. If we want to grow in our relationship with God, then we have to spend time with him. I believe that when we spend time with God, when we're in those moments of solitude, just us and God, not only will our love for God grow, but in those moments, I believe that we will experience and receive God's love in new ways and maybe even fresh ways. Because there are things that we want, there are things that we need, there are things that we desire and long for that can only be found in the presence of God, but we will never receive those things if we don't take the time and the discipline to spend time with him alone. We need to create the space to allow God to speak to us. Create the space to allow God to move in our heart or instruct us or lead us or convict us. We need to have intentional time with God. The second reason why I say that solitude is like a date with God is because when you're dating someone, you don't want to do the same thing every single time you're with them, right? You want to spice it up a little bit. You want to do different things. As I was preparing this message, I got to this point, and so I texted Ashley. She's here right now. But I texted her, and I was like, what are like some of your favorite dates that we went on or had together? And some of the highlights, one was we went to Westfield. There's like this, I think it's either Monin or Monin Trail. Anyone know? Monon, okay, neither of those. Went to the Monon Trail, and we went in like these electric bikes, and so we're just like zooming down this trail, super pretty, so much fun. Another one was we went to this like outdoor ice skating rink in I think Carmel. Hilarious. Neither of us were very good, but it was super fun to just go and do this. But both of us would agree on this that we've done a lot of fun things, but one of the most fun things that we've ever done, or maybe not ever done, but one of our favorite things to do together is just go to a coffee shop and just get coffee and just sit there and talk to each other. No agenda, nothing that we have to do, nothing that we have to talk about, just be there together with each other and just see where the day takes us. Well, with solitude, when it comes to spending time with God, there's no blueprint, there's no script. You don't have to do the same thing every time. It's just about spending time with God. A lot of us, when I say spend time with God, I think most of us probably think about either reading our Bible or praying. Those are great things. Those are things that we should be doing, but solitude is more than that. It's not just boiled down to those two things. You can meditate, you can worship, you can journal, you can really do whatever you want. The purpose of it is just to be alone with God. Solitude, it can look however you want it to. The purpose is just to spend time with God. The bottom line for tonight is that there's no substitute for solitude. There's no substitute for solitude. James 4:8, it talks about if we draw near to God, then he will draw near to us. There's no substitute for solitude because if we want to grow in our relationship with God, if we want to take that next step, if we want to become more like Jesus, then we have to spend time with him. There's no other way around it. There's no quick way to do this. We have to spend time with him. And so what would it look like for you to make room for God this week? In the midst of the busyness, in the midst of the chaos and the noise and the responsibility and the worries and everything that you have going on, what would it look like for you this week to make room for God? There's no substitute for solitude. If we want to bridge the gap between us and God, then we have to regularly spend time alone with him and make room for him in our life.